Now, although tracking student achievement has always been important to educators, the rise of online education has made it more difficult. The panelists coming up will discuss whether or not they believe that the existing evaluation processes focused on online test outcomes are adequate to identify how well a student has mastered the subject taught in class. I'd like to invite the panelists and moderator to begin their discussion on evaluation in education, digital and comprehensive online assessments.
Okay, I think before we get started with this session, I think we need to thank the tech people for all the hard work they put in and our lovely room assistant. They've had this come off. No, they've hit some hurdles that they've had to get over today and yesterday, but thank you. We just wouldn't be we couldn't do this without you guys, so thank you very much for everything you do. I'm Curtis Clough. I'm the superintendent at Hagerman Municipal Schools, also CEO and lead facilitator for Rise to Next Level Consulting. We're going to cover today's topic, which is digital and comprehensive online assessments, the good, the bad, and the ugly. First, this is kind of a loose presentation. If you guys have questions or you want to make some comments, walk your way up to the mic and we'll be able to call on you to have your input because we really want to have some of your input. This needs to be interactive so we can have the full discussion. Also, some opening comments so you guys are aware of some of the perspectives we have. First, this is the world according to Clough at my school district where I'm currently at. First, we're not a big believers in the online state assessment systems. We believe they're a one-time snapshot of the kid's knowledge on that given day and not really a true assessment of what true learning is going on in the classroom. And it shouldn't be the end-all, be-all of what a kid's success in a school setting. Also, grade inflation is a real serious problem across this country when it comes to assessment, whether in person or online. So what constitutes true assessment of student success? And those types of questions need to be answered as we go forward. And obviously, we've heard it a lot. Computers, assessments, or tools may not be the all substitute for the relationships that are created inside classrooms with teachers and in-person instruction. So those personal relationships are critical to whatever student success is or will be, including the use of the technologies that are present for us. So that kind of gives you some frameworks of what we're going to be discussing today. Now I'm going to let my esteemed panelists, we're small but mighty, give their 30-second elevator speech of who they are, what they do, and why they're involved in this topic. So I'll start with it.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ipek Williamson. I'm coming from Ontario, Canada. I'm an insight coach and meditation teacher. And I love to work with people who are going through change, major change in general. And I also love to work with people who are going through burnout. So that's one of my favorite topics too. And
yeah. Hello, I'm Jay Moore from Michigan. I'm an education consultant by trade, and so I focus on talent development, workforce development. I've been a former middle school teacher and educator recruiter.
My name is Dr. Yvette Wilson-Barnes. I'm the Associate Dean of Student Affairs at the City University of New York School of Law, where I've been for 4 years. And prior to that, I was the Dean of Students at Union Theological Seminary for 9 years. And this topic is very important to me, particularly with regards to students with disabilities. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about my concerns and issues with pop-up exams and not factoring in the need for students with disabilities who have time and a half, double time, triple time, to have that allocated time to complete their exams.
Okay, first question for our panelists. What have been your experiences in creating or using digital assessments and evaluations in your areas of expertise?
Well, I'm a coach. I'm not a teacher. I don't teach children or young adults or teenagers. But as a coach, I have multiple clients and I use digital assessment tools to take a snapshot of where they are, how they are doing, and what is the situation now and where we gonna go, where we want to go with them. And but I never rely on solely with the online assessment. I always go through so many things on one-on-one so that I can understand what's underneath those answers, those feedbacks that were given. I can understand that teachers might not have that kind of time to spend this much time with each student. But I firmly believe that online assessments can only give us, as you said, a snapshot of that person at that specific moment. And it doesn't give us a real idea on where really they are at learning and understanding. So, so it gives us a quantitative information. But we need to go after the qualitative information. Quantitative only shows us the left side of the brain, how it's doing. But we need to also check out the right side, because otherwise we cannot get a full picture. So that's what I think and feel. But you are more educators, so I will.
So from the lens that I'm speaking from as a former middle school teacher and also as a director on a school board, I would say it depends on each student, right? And as a person that has always taught in Title I schools, it's always a learning curve or a curve when you're grading. And so you have to take that data in consideration. And so I guess the short answer, I'm not sure if it's that great or what my feelings is about it, because you always end up having, I guess it gives you data to then go back and say, where do I need to teach, right? And where do I need to focus? But I don't think it should be the standard, because once again, if majority of my class falls under, let's say 50%, then I have to assess, well, am I doing something right? Am I doing something wrong? Is it a type of learning style? Is there some type of, which I know you're going to talk about as well, some type of disability that I'm not reading or able to comprehend? Or what is the solution? What do I need to do? So.
Yeah, most of my career in education has been at the graduate level, so within theological education and legal education. There's a number of ways, right, in which we are determining whether the student is learning and taking in the information and the content in order to, in the instance of law school, prepare for the bar examination. And so there's a number of, I think, different methods that our faculty use, right? One, which is a number of learning management systems that they utilize in order to see if the student is engaging the material, engaging one another. There's also these more practical assessments. Moot court, for example, is where our students get to practice being a lawyer, arguing a case. And so there's exams, there's the practical piece, there's the fellowships and the internships, and then the assessment and evaluation that comes from internship supervisor that allows us to get a good sense that our student is taking in this information and they're able to apply what the knowledge and what they are learning. And I think that, in this digital age, and particularly since the pandemic, where we were forced as an institution, certainly at CUNY, to move to remote learning and thinking about how we use technology to assess the knowledge. And I think that we're still trying to figure out, the best way to do that. But one of the things that, has been extremely important to us is ensuring that the assessment of the student's knowledge is competency-based and practice-based.
That makes a very good transition. Panelists brought up some of the questions that we were talking about, the qualitative and quantitative balance of what true learning goes on inside the classroom, as well as multiple other issues of the snapshot. Is it instructional practice that's causing the low scores, or is it actually the software, or are there other things that could be the hurdles inside digital assessments and evaluation that occur? So this is a great segue into our second question, and I'll give some context to it once I'm done asking. Okay, what innovations and adaptations or barriers have you seen during the pre and post-COVID areas in your areas of expertise? I'll give you an example. Like in a K through 12 setting, we noticed the skills gap not only of our students and asking them how to perform, but also our teachers. How to use those assessments truly and fully. Did they truly understand it? Was another add-on to more work that they were doing done? Their traditional days now gone. You're on call 24/7. And also, as well as at the same time, some of the other barriers that were going on is the digital divide that's occurring with access to this, and that the kids could not get to the online assessments to give that true doing it. And is it short cycle versus long cycle? Are we doing interim assessments? Are we doing it as a comprehensive measure? There's a whole bunch of issues that causes this. So I'd like to hear the panelists' thoughts on any innovations, adaptations, or barriers that you guys faced during pre-COVID and post-COVID. I know it's going to be much different in a coaching environment
Yes.
than it would be in an educational environment, but go ahead.
Obviously, it's very different, but at the end of the day, I can see that during COVID, everything had to improve or grow like exponentially in just like lightning fast. So everybody had to find a way to figure out how to assess children's success levels. And obviously the easiest way was doing it in a digital way, and less time consuming too, of course. But as you said, the environments where some children don't have access to even computers, or it's so funny, some children had to get to a computer to do their schoolwork, but they never sometimes used it before. So there's a learning curve attached to it too. So it has been a good progress in every level of digital assessments. But before getting to that, we like seeing children and meeting where they are, as Leslie used to say, meeting where they are and finding out what are you capable of using, and will you be able to express yourself through this testing model. So even though I believe it got better because of COVID, because of schooling from home had to improve. But even then, I don't believe that it is enough tool to assess our children. Like children needs nurturing and being one-on-one treatment. So that's what I feel. And I'm not, as I said, an educator like you are, but as a mother, as a teacher, meditation teacher maybe, but still what I see is this. Yeah.
So from a teacher at a Title I school, that's kind of my viewpoint. I would say from a teacher side of things, I think it just made them more aware of what challenges students were having at home, right? And then from the other side, which you hit on this, was the access of internet. And then in our particular school, we've had to pretty much give, I think about 70% of our students like Chromebooks. And not only getting Chromebooks, but you also had to give them a hotspot as well too, which is probably a fancy way of saying that their family probably could not afford internet or get on to Google Drive. And so there were all these different barriers. And then if you, once again, add into, well, if they don't have access to Chromebooks or Google Drive or a hotspot or anything like that, you may have some students that are at home that I'm an 8th grader, but I'm having to take care of my little brother and little sister, and my caregiver is working 3 different jobs to put food on the table, which oftentimes I would describe them as surviving families, right? So you have all these different barriers. So in terms of, I forgot what the question was, but I think I'm answering
You're
it.
answering it.
So,
Yeah.
but in terms of barriers, I think from both sides, from the educator side of things, they were just aware of challenges. From the student side of things, it was really kind of a test of faith to see if they can stay in there with proper resource.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up about, these barriers. I mean, once, COVID hit, I remember the last day of class, or the last day that we were in the building. It was March 12th, 2020. And, the chancellor had sent us, CUNY's chancellor had sent us, information about what we needed to do next to figure out how we were going to be a distance learning program. And everyone was like, oh my God, our particular program was not online because we are mandated and required by the ABA, by the American Bar Association, and by the Court of Appeals, right, to have in-class programming. So this was all very new for us. And one of the things that CUNY did do was make available Chromebooks, right, for students. Here was the issue, though, because when it came time for exams, one of the platforms that we would use is Exemplify, and it was not compatible with the Chromebooks.
Yes. Yep. Never have issues with tech in this. Okay, we have a question from the audience, or a comment. Go ahead. Who are you and what do you do?
Hi, can you hear me? Oh gosh.
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a mental health professional. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here for the Health 2.0 conference, and just started to pop over and see what you guys were talking about. One of the big issues that I've noticed both in the mental health field but also in education is how COVID has affected obviously all of us, but the social emotional learning effects on their ability to focus, concentrate in the school in school, but also how teachers are managing the behaviors differently or have to manage different attitudes or expectations of teachers, parents, admin, students. And so I was curious what more specifically to the testing, what differences have you seen or heard about or talked about from pre-COVID versus post-COVID, and how those social emotional learning differences or the things that have come out of COVID in terms of the social emotional learning necessities have you learned about or talked about or understand?
Well, I can tell you from my perspective. I'm former district testing coordinator at Silver Consolidated Schools, and I oversee all testing right now with my guidance counselor at Hagerman. I think the 2 biggest challenges we have faced, okay, obviously we did online testing beforehand, but nothing like being assessed all the time online. I mean, that's the biggest thing that we faced, is the test apathy that was hitting our kids when they came back into in-person session. They just viewed this as another source of assessment. Do I need to take this thing seriously? I mean, that's the biggest hurdle we're trying to overcome right now, because our state for 3 years hasn't counted state test scores towards school districts. So the message has been said it doesn't matter, but yet we're in an online testing environment where it does matter. And I think the biggest thing that occurred that we noticed is the test anxiety for that test figured, even though they don't care, it heightened because they didn't know how to handle it, because they hadn't socialized. They're now in a very structured testing setting. And how do I act when I get done? What am I supposed to do? We had to retrain them all how to take those online assessments again, because, like I said, test apathy had set in. They'd done it online for 2 years. They're doing it now. We try to blend it more. I actually petitioned my state, New Mexico, for us to go back to pencil and paper tests for a year or 2, especially for our young kids, for them to learn how to take it. Because we're starting to find out the skills they may have acquired during the COVID era were probably bad skills, and is affecting their test scores. Because it's point and click on all these other assessments. Now you got to go out and type an essay, You're asking a third grader to go in there and write a sentence or a paragraph. They haven't even had keyboarding yet. It doesn't happen until 5th grade in my state. So those are the issues we kind of found out at the K through 12 level. And looking at it, the social emotional part of it was huge because in both districts I've been in during COVID, we had social emotional support time. Now, was it fully utilized by those teachers? I had great PE teachers that did dance classes or did video games, whatever, I can't remember what the dance one is. I can't remember what it is, but those, she actually had them doing video games online as a means of releasing them. And it worked out great. And then we had the PE, dribbling basketballs. Now we had some parents complain because some things got broken in their house because they had a ball in the house. I don't want to go into that as an administrator. But some of those things did happen. But that's the biggest thing, is having them understand how to be in that testing environment again when our state sent the message it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for that. We had at the time one counselor for about 700 students. And one of the things, certainly, I mean, our mental health counselor was just working day and night to provide that kind of support to our students, counseling support. The good thing is that we also, thanks to CUNY's chancellor, we ended up partnering with crisis text line. So that was a resource, and then legal assistance was available as well to our students. One of the other things that I just want to quickly mention is that our faculty, decided to kind of move away from kind of exams that were timed. So basically, they were take-home exams, or you had 24 hours to 48 hours to complete an exam, right? So that we were able to determine the knowledge that the students were gaining from what they were learning. So that really helped to mitigate and decrease the anxiety that students had. So that's just one example.
For us, after post-COVID, they were more intentional about mental health, social, emotional, not only from the student side, but also from the educator side as well too, because they were being burnt out. And where before, there was definitely individual behavior plans for students, but I could tell the shift was that this is a bigger issue. Obviously, we all have to figure this out, right? And so I would just say from our perspective, it was just more so, let's put more resources and more supports in place and retraining and re-educating them of, this is how you take a test, this is what this looks like, this is how you write with a pencil, as silly as that sounds, just all of those things, because for 2 years, we were all kind of locked up in the house, right? And you can imagine as a child, when you're getting these social and physical and motor skills, when you're used to being with your peers, but you don't have any of that, it causes a whole nother set of issues. So,
next question.
Yes, good afternoon. Excellent panel so far. My name is Dr. Iris Garner, and I just wanted to hear a little bit about how technology literacy impacts or drives beside assessment, right? Because if the student doesn't have the understanding of how to navigate the technology, then perhaps their scores will not be reflective of what they know and can do. Thank you.
Go ahead, you can go first.
No, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, this is something that we have been having conversations about at the law school, where there are a number of different learning management platforms that our students have to access. There's like actually too many. You've got Blackboard, then you've got Moodle, and then you've got all these different platforms. I mean, at our institution, there's faculty, they're using about six to seven different ones. And so, there is conversation about how can we streamline that, where there is this one platform or one or no more than two that our students are able to access, because the students are getting overwhelmed, particularly our students that have disabilities or that have ADHD or, suffer with anxiety and depression. Trying to manage all of these different platforms can be, quite overwhelming. And then you've got to take exams through each of these different platforms. It's extremely stressful. So I think that there's a lot of work that definitely needs to be done in that particular area.
So I'm going to put my workforce hat on really quickly to
answer
to answer that question. One of the things that I've seen, right, you go into career exposure, right? So we're now in a Zoom culture of things. And so if we're teaching or we're pushing students to say get into a tech field or something like that, and if they're on the Zoom and say the staff at that particular company culturally does not know how to communicate with that student, that also creates another barrier, which is another issue. And so then you have to go back and look and see, well, now is it a diversity issue, or how can we work around that, and what does that look like, along with all the other things that you named as well. So I wanted to mention that.
And for me, as a coach, I have been seeing more and more younger people dealing with anxiety and depression, and my clients are getting younger and younger. My youngest client is 21 years old. He's a college student, and it's someone, I cannot remember the name, but one of the panelists the other day mentioned the pandemic created a tsunami, and while you are in something and you are living through it, you don't feel it. As soon as you start to get out of it, then the tsunami hits you, and we knew that this was gonna be the case. We were bracing ourselves for when everything is over and all the psychological effects of pandemic will hit, and it is hitting. Unfortunately, it is. And as educators, as teachers, as coaches, or social workers, or psychologists, therapists, everybody needs our help. On the other hand, of course, we need to help ourselves too. We need to take care of ourselves to be able to take care of others. So the psychological part and mental health part of the equation has been really, really big, really impactful. And I think what I can say is we all are trying our best to help.
Can I just add one thing? I mean, right, Zoom fatigue, right, has been a huge thing. And I think one of the challenges that many faculty had was, how do I use this platform in a creative way? How do I not just do straight lecture for 3 hours with maybe like 1 or 2, 5 or 10 minute breaks, but how do I learn how to use the breakout rooms? And have the students engaged, and how do I have them come back to the main room and report back? And how can that be a way to assess, the knowledge that has, and the conversation, and hear the conversations that took place in those breakout rooms? How can I use the poll feature, to see if the group or the class is taking in the knowledge, capturing it, and at least getting a benchmark of, okay, well, 30% of the class, gets it, the other 20 doesn't. What do I need to do to kind of re-strategize my teaching approach?
First, I want to thank you for that question, because that's the very next question on our list. As an MC and the moderator of this, it was a perfect lead-in to what we're talking about, because we had this in-depth discussion the other night of the impact it's not only had on our students, but had on our staffs and our operations as organizations. I think that's the biggest flip we had to make in K-12. I worked in higher ed in prior incantation of my career in Arizona that had its own online digital academy, and I still had professors back there I was friends with, I'd see on Facebook. They made the transition seamlessly because their skill sets were much better adapt to it than what K through 12 or the regular classroom higher ed teacher was. So how it affected our operations, to get back to your question, how the digital literacy part plays into this. In my district, we're currently asking that question: what does true assessment involve? And what needs to happen in order for it to occur? If we're going to use these online assessments, you might as well play the game with the state and figure out how we're going to get the best test scores playing that game when it really doesn't matter, in my opinion. That's me speaking politically in the state of New Mexico because our test scores haven't counted for 3 years. But if we're looking at it on how do we upskill our staff and how do we integrate that into our daily operation and give them the time, because right now in my state where I'm at in New Mexico, they're talking about increasing the amount of instructional hours to 1140 for every student in our state. Right now it's at 990 and 1080. Elementary, K through 6 is 990. Secondary, 7 through 12 is 1080. That also counts preschool. So now you're going to have our preschool kids go from 990 hours in a week, which is a 4-day week for them, with the teachers because they do stuff with parents, to 1140. How's that going to impact our operational view? And if we're trying to integrate technology and create 21st century skills in these kids earlier, is more time necessary to answer? I go no. The best for me is I want better quality, not quantity. The better the instructor I have in front of that student, whether it's online or in person, the more impact I'm going to have in that student's life. And that's how I've always viewed this. I was an online instructor when I was back in college, back in the old days in 2011. It's amazing how far Moodle, Angel, Blackboard, all those companies have come. Now you got Canvas. When the first time I instructed an online class, I was the academic chair at the campus, assistant dean. I had to teach one class. They said, go online, it's going to be easy. No, it wasn't. I taught in person all my life. I said, next semester I'm teaching sociology in the classroom. I'm done. Because I did not have the necessary skill set. And that was the biggest thing. And I've encouraged, if you were here for the digital literacy one, I've encouraged my staff to make that their focus for the next 2 years. We'll take care of the first 3 parts of your evaluation. You wouldn't be here as a teacher working for me if I didn't know you were a good teacher. I mean, that's how I've approached this, and I laid that expectation on the line very easily, but I've also set an atmosphere where they're allowed to fail and not have them be crucified by it. So I've created that balance as the district lead, setting the vision with my board and with my administrators and my teaching staff of that balance between you need to go try something new, or I may have to go find somebody else to do it new for me. And my staff respects me. They come to me all the time. I mean, I'm into buildings almost as much as my principals when I can be, except for I'm dealing with all the other issues as a superintendent, like unemployment claims, personnel, dealing with attorneys, all those other sidebars I've got to do. But I try to be the instructional leader of the district as a superintendent, set that tone. And I even tell them when I screw up, when I send out an email incorrectly or do those things, they know it's okay to screw up. And right now we're working on our professional development for next year already. And this is exactly a topic that our district has hit upon, is upskilling our kids, because the one word I hate as an educator right now, and the politicians are using it against us, is learning loss. We didn't lose any learning. We have a learning gap because of decisions that were made by politicians to make them stay at home. They lost those social skills. They lost those kindergarten and first grade years where they're getting those fine motor skills to do all those things. It's not a loss. You created a loss. If you're going to say it, then you created it as politicians. It's a gap. We always have gaps in education. You have a gap when they leave at the end of a semester in college, come back the next semester. If they wind up taking poli-sci 105, they have to take 106 next semester. Algebra. Once I got to advanced math, my grades became the imaginary number that I was studying in advanced math when I got there. I was not a math person. I thought I was until I got to my senior year. But those are the types of things that always happen, but they seem to be politicizing COVID with decisions they made with the loss as opposed to it being a gap that we try to overcome. And I keep stressing that to my staff all the time right now. And it's really affected how we've operated. We're very similar. We may not be a Title I school, but we're pretty dang close to being a Title I district. I got 84% free and reduced, and we're applying for CEP now to be district-wide. And that way we can be Title I completely and use all those resources. So I think that's the dialogue we need to have of how operationally we're going to move forward, because we can't move back. I mean, regardless of what people are saying, technology has become embedded in the education world. We can't go back to pre-COVID, even though there are a lot of people, and I know districts in my area where I'm at in the state, that are trying to go back to, well, we're going to just do in-person instruction. You can't. Our kids have gotten used to it. The colleges are expecting it. The careers are expecting it. Matter of fact, I'm working with the Carpenters Union right now and doing a virtual class with my juniors and seniors to get them career exploration in carpentry. And one of the things they do is they have to pass the tech assessment that carpenter, you don't think carpentry is a tech field? They got to set up design and make sure to know where in the heck to order their supplies at. So yeah, it is very technical. So I think those are all the things we got to take into account as moving forward. That digital literacy, not only for the students, but the digital literacy is for the staff, because like I said, I got an experienced staff. They've learned really quickly to be really good on the computer because I made them do it. So we do it that way.
Yeah, and I would say that, I mean, each of us are, at different types of institutions. At the law school, we are not we are not a online program. We are not a hybrid program. We've just been forced to be in that position because of COVID. But regardless of that, I think, like you said, there is this deficit of learning. And I said this Monday, that if the staff don't have what they need, the students can't get what they need. The same thing with the faculty, and that the onboarding experience and process that faculty need to go through needs to include digital learning and how to do these assessments in a way that also takes into consideration our students with disabilities. The last thing I wanted to say as well is that, as we're preparing our law students to take the bar exam, one of the things that, which is to assess their knowledge and learning to become attorneys, we are grappling with our students with disabilities who are requesting accommodations for this exam and are getting denied. Yeah. And they're getting denied because they can't show that they had anxiety or they had ADHD from when they were a kid, because they didn't get diagnosed until they either got to college or law school. So we're grappling with that, and so that is a barrier as well, to so many of our students across the country, not having that extra time that they need to take this exam so that they can be the best lawyers that they can be.
Okay, last question before we do some wrap-ups at the end. How do you view the future of digital assessment evaluation, its impact on workforce and economic development, as well as best practices in virtual reality training and other things that have yet to even be tapped in the field of education?
Well, I see that especially during this conference, we heard a lot about AI and AI technology, how it's impacting and how it will impact more and more going forward. And in my opinion, what needs to be happening is that AI technology should be used in a way as a tool, as a help for the teachers, for the educators, so that part maybe takes care of the quantitative side of the assessment, while teachers can focus on the quantitative side of assessment of their students. So that for that reason, I really see the AI technology as a good tool that will create free time for educators, so that they can do what they are meant to do, just nurture and give more attention that the students deserve. That's what I feel and think about it.
I think those educators that get it, right, and can lead in that way will do a great service to students in that way, and hopefully students end up with educators that are progressive in that way and they get it, just like how you talked about with the basketball, or if you integrate TikTok or whatever it is from a digital point. Far as students age-wise, or if I had to put a grade on it, I think the sweet little baby angels that are like K through third, right? They may have a better chance in terms of things already being worked out. So as they go through and they get to middle school and high school, it's now the norm, right? And that's just with the assumption that everything else was corrected before then. So,
I think digital literacy is critical. Certainly at the law school level, and I'm going to lift up one of our professors, Joe Rosenberg. He actually has a course on technology in the law, and really trying to educate our students on how to integrate technology into the practice of law, so that they're ready. Because as my friend said, we're not going backwards. If we didn't know how to use technology before the pandemic, we sure have been introduced to it, and we're not going back. So it's a force. So we have to figure out how to use this tool and use it in a way, though, that is equitable, and to identify what the barriers are in using that technology, and making sure that everyone has access, not just a few, not just those who can afford it, not just those who are used to using it, but to make sure that we get everyone at the same place of using technology that is going to advance knowledge.
I think to go along with that, in my role as a superintendent and looking, I always use this analogy. When I was growing up, there were chalkboards. When I was in high school, there were smart boards, and now we have computers. It's been progressive. Education's progressing, and with this conference called Ed 2.0 for a reason. We want to advance it. And I think as we look forward with this, those that embrace the technology and be able to do it, now I think there's a fine line between overdoing it and not doing it enough. Because like right now, Yvette brought this up, we were using 6 different platforms to get through COVID in 2 different districts I was working in. How do we simplify this and get it down? We went to Clough to have a single login for our students, so that way the same password goes for everything, no matter what they're doing in our district. Made it easier for them. They could remember one password, not be like me and have 6 or 7 different passwords, get on my state stuff, write them on a piece of paper inside my desk. Okay, nobody on the internet break into my office and get in, but you don't want to get the access to New Mexico Department of Education documents anyway. Those things are a pain in the butt to fill out. But it made it easier for them to understand and use it as the tool that's supposed to be, not the replacement of a teacher. Because we still got to have that social aspect in schools and all that. The way I'm really seeing it progressing, especially in rural campuses, of my 27 years in admin, I believe I counted, I've been 23 of them on a district or campus that's been authorized by the federal government as a rural and frontier district, which is isolation. And when I look at that, the lack of access my kids have to real valued careers and have them understand it and being able to utilize that. We entered into an agreement with a company called Nepris for us to do career exploration for our kids K through 12. Because my kids, if we're going over to Roswell, we're in oil and gas country, we're also in cattle country, dairy country in New Mexico, that's all they know. But yet we were able to get a systems go pre-engineering program going to New Mexico Junior College in Socorro. And now we have 15 to 16 kids, and we had one kid that actually went to Texas Tech on an engineering scholarship last year out of the program. That's something he never would have had if we wouldn't have reached out and used those online resources for that program and looking at it. But I think that's going to be the key, is if we're really looking at individualize this and get kids exposure to what they really want to do and be passionate about, how do we utilize those resources so districts like mine have access to those type of money first off. This is definitely a dollar figure that's going to cost districts now in the future. To get them those experiences to be able to become a doctor, law enforcement, carpenter, bioengineer, whatever they want to be. Med fields are exploding, but yet 10% of my kids want to go into it because they don't know it. I mean, I think that's the big thing, is using it as a tool to help support that knowledge and gain it and move it forward and see what can happen. Use it as a resource. Don't rely on it as a crutch, because I've known teachers that relied on the crutch, used it, they sit there, instruct, and the kids get frustrated. Work with them to make them understand the need as well as the necessary skills, because we all know Zoom. We still had kids coming to the company. This is funny because we did have elementary kids the first day we came back after COVID. wearing their pajamas to school because they thought that was their behavior as first and second graders. That's because they were in a class, they were at home the entire time being able to do that. And the other thing is, how do you have a kid that comes in third grade, tests at a seventh grade reading level, and comes back to the second grade level and they came back to school in person? Could that have been one of their parents taking a test across the table from them or something? Or their older brother and sister? We got to be aware of those issues too. If we're going to look at true assessment and true advancement, there's a whole bunch of operational changes we have to make as schools to make sure we adapt to it and make sure those students are getting what they need to be successful in those areas and have it. So I'll let Yvette do that, and then we'll do the wrap.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing because you were talking about workforce, and it was interesting that at the beginning of the pandemic, so many of our students had been accepted into internship and fellowship programs, and then found themselves without internships and fellowships, simply because the places of employment also were not digitally literate, and therefore could not accommodate our students in these internships opportunities. And then we had to scramble and try to find these new internships for them with organizations and with law firms, with legal organizations, with nonprofit organizations that were digitally literate and could accommodate our students. So it's not just in the classroom, it's right, our students need the literacy, the faculty need the literacy, and then these organizations and these places of employment where our students can get the experience to learn that particular field also need digital literacy.
Okay, last question. One quick golden nugget you'd like to leave all our colleagues on online assessment. Yeah, 30 seconds each because we're running out of time. One golden nugget you'd like to leave with your colleagues.
Well, testing should be not only qualitative, but also quantitative. It should be, there should be an equilibrium. That's what I say.
Just to have proper resources in place and preparation so students can do their best.
And I would say that, we need to be able to give our students the practical experience so that they can apply the knowledge that they're learning in the classroom. And that, I think, is the most powerful way to assess students' knowledge of the information.
I think to go along with Yvette, I say the same thing I said with the literacy. Application. Let them understand the need for it and why they have to act this way, because in an online environment, what they do now on social media may cost them in the future. And those types of things. I think there's this golden umbrella over children right now, or teenagers, think they're invincible. And I think their habits need to be formed earlier. We need to get them that information so they make stupid decisions that can cost them when they go for jobs after they graduate from high school or college. I think those are the types of things that we need to be focusing on. Have them embrace this as it's a skill. We all know technology is a skill. You can be a programmer, you can be a social media expert, but what other skills do we need to support with them in order to be successful with these online assessments and evaluations and be able to make sure we have a true picture of assessment that goes on with that student throughout his entire career. So, other than that, are there any questions? We do have some time left. If there's any questions left.
Can I just say one thing? I really appreciate what you said about the digital footprint, that, we need to ensure that our students are being mindful of not only how they're engaging these platforms, but social media. And that it could affect their career in the long run. And that's something that we have to really educate our students about, simply because of character and fitness. To become an attorney, they are looking at your digital footprint. And so that's an important part of education as well.
I think that's a good. Let's thank the panelists for their input today. Really appreciate their knowledge and everything else. Again, thank you to everybody for helping pull this off. The tech people have been incredible. Everybody's there. Hope you have a good rest of the conference, and thank you for paying attention.